All right, it is my honor to introduce to you the wind beneath my wings, the bend to my Jerry. Please give it up for the amazing actor slash host, MC extraordinaire, the Julie Snyder!
Hello, everyone. I've been waiting a very long time to say this again. Welcome to BookCon. But y'all, I know you're not here to see me, so please welcome to the stage Marie Lu and Holly Black. Marie is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of more than 15 novels, including Legend, The Young Elite, Warcross, Sky Hunter, Stars and Smoke, and Red City. Holly Black is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of fantasy novels, including the novels of Elfhame, The Coldest Girl in Cold Town, The Spiderwick Chronicles, and her adult debut novel, Book of Night. Welcome, y'all. It is such an absolute pleasure to be kicking things off with you today here at BookCon.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Julie.
Thank
you
you
guys for being here.
Absolutely. So, had you been to previous iterations of this, or is this your first time here?
Yeah,
we
we're
have. And this is different.
veterans. Yeah, this is nice. It's so I'm just so glad it's back.
Yes, we are as well. Is there anything you're particularly excited about this weekend?
I'm excited about this.
All right, well, let's kick things off. Let's go back to your origin story. Let's talk about, can you share with everyone, how did you know you wanted to become a writer?
Oh, good Lord. I really did want to be a writer for a really, really long time, from the time I was a kid. I liked reading stories. And so I thought, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make up the exact story that I want that doesn't exist yet. And I believe the essential tragedy of a writer is you can make the story that you want most in all the world, but you will never read it as a reader. You will only ever read it and think, should I change that comma? But that is, I wanted to do that, and I didn't know anyone who had ever kind of made a living as an artist. I didn't know anyone who'd kind of even published a book or, sold a painting or anything like that. And so it seemed like a completely impossible task. And I think the thing that I try to remember, and I vowed to remember, is how far that felt from my life. And how incredibly weird it was to step across what had felt like an unconquerable divide.
No, I know exactly what you mean by that, because I lived in this little suburb outside of Houston, and we had the one Barnes and Noble in our area, and I love to write, but I didn't know that you could be a writer. I read tons of books, but it didn't occur to me that the names on books were real people. You just think of it's like Calvin Klein, which I know is a real person, but he's not a real person. So that's what I thought in my head. I didn't make the connection of where books came from. And I think I first realized that books were written by real people when I was 13, and I saw an article in the Houston Chronicle about this girl named Amelia Atwater Rhodes who had written, she wrote In the Forest of the Night, and it was a big deal because she was 13 at the time, and I was like, what? First, real people write books, and second, she was 13 at the time. I was like, I'm 13, I can write a book too. So I started writing this terrible Lord of the Rings knockoff, which I thought was great, and I sent it to agents and everything. So these poor agents got 100 agents got this absolutely horrible query letter. So yeah, that was when I knew I wanted to be a writer, I think.
I too wrote a bad book that I sent out. And I will say, and I don't know how you felt about it, but at that time there was a lot of advice about getting rejections. And I do remember, while obviously no one wants a rejection, I do remember feeling I'm in the game.
It was back. Do you remember the self-addressed stamped envelope? Yeah. You had to send a sassy. They're this was back when you had to snail mail query letters, and they were you have to send a self-addressed stamped envelope so that they can send a rejection back to you.
So obviously you both have quite a bit of experience with the querying process, and I know that we've got writers in the audience as well. So can you talk about, for you, that path to publishing, some of those steps and where you did get there? Because it's always so interesting how much it varies for everyone.
I mean, so I had a kind of strange path to publishing because I was writing my first book, Jive, and I was writing it and writing it and writing it. And around that time, I met my friend and future collaborator, Tony DeLizzi, because I interviewed him because he was doing art for Magic cards and for other like D&D and White Wolf games, and I was editing a gaming magazine. And so we became friends, and and in the background of our friendship, I was writing this book, which I think he suspected was terrible. And like I thought I was writing an adult book, and then I had a friend who's a children's librarian, and she read it, and she said, "I think this is a YA book." And I was like, "Surely not. There's so much swearing and violence." And she was like, "I don't think that you know what's in YA books." And so she gave me Garth Nix's Sabriel, and I think Tamora Pierce, Protector of the Small. And I was like, "Well, I don't know what this is, but this sounds great. Like, I'm in." And around that time, Tony wound up giving part of my book. I had all of these boxes because you would have mailed out the book. So I had bought the boxes and was ready to print them out. And he passed on some of it to his editor, Kevin Lewis at Simon & Schuster, who hemmed and hawed for a really long time. And then wound up offering for it. And so I went in kind of in this sideways way. And so I was like, oh, this contract? No, I don't need to consult anyone. Sign in blood? No questions. Later, when I had an agent, they were like, "Why did you do that?" And I was like, "It was my dream."
I don't think I've ever heard that story before. I've known Holly forever, and this is the first time I knew that. That's so interesting.
And that's why Simon & Schuster owns my soul.
I think we're all very glad that your books made it out to the wilds. So I wrote my very terrible Lord of the Rings knockoff book and sent that out. At the time, there was the internet, but not a ton of information. I didn't know anyone else who wanted to be a writer or was interested, and so I remember just being at the library, like checking out any book I could find on like how to write a novel, how to submit your book, and figuring out the process and just trying to get an agent. So obviously I didn't get an agent for that first book. Wrote a second one that actually has the main character of Legend in it, Day. So that book didn't get published, but he made it out of that. It's the only thing that made it out of these. It was the only decent thing in that book. So I did get an agent with the second one. I had accumulated hundreds of rejection letters at this point, and he sent it out for like a year and a half. Didn't get anywhere with it. And I did that 3 or 4 more times throughout college and majored in biology and political science because I thought I was going to be a doctor or a lawyer. I think it's for the best of the world that I did not become either one of those things. I would have been very terrible at both. But at the end of, and I also didn't know that you edited a gaming magazine, so we both have gaming backgrounds. After college, I was still trying to get published, and I remember feeling kind of I don't know if I can be a lawyer. I'm so non-confrontational. Feel like this is the worst possible choice for me. So I saw a campus billboard that was advertising an internship at Disney for gaming, and I was a gamer and loved all of that and creative arts of any kind. So I was like, well, maybe I can do this while I'm trying to get a book published or figure out my life or whatever, and ended up working in gaming for 5 years. And during that time, I was still getting rejected. I think I accumulated 600 or 700 rejection letters, and eventually finally got an agent who sent out my first book, which was The Kingdom of Back, which didn't get anywhere. But because I got her, she submitted Legend, which was the first one that finally made it over. And I also had a moment where I didn't really know much about YA, and I was like, what is YA? And this was around when The Hunger Games had just come out, and my agent's like, well, your book slots very neatly into YA dystopian. I was like, great, let's send it as that. I'll figure it out as we go. And then ended up loving YA and ended up staying in it for a bit. And that was my journey, I guess.
And of course now you both have your adult novels as well. So in the context of your writing and the worlds that you're exploring, what does the dark fantasy mean to you?
So I once was on a panel where someone actually like drew a bright line between dark fantasy and horror, and it's always really stuck with me that in horror the supernatural element is an aberration, it is wrongness, and in dark fantasy, no matter how dangerous, no matter how bad, it fills you with a sense of awe and wonder. And that has really stuck with me as being like the line also for me, that no matter how dark, it has to have that feeling of like, well, this is real bad, but I kind of don't want it to not be here.
Drawn into the darkness. Yeah, I think that's such a great way of putting it. I never thought about it like that, but now that's gonna stick in my head forever. I wrote several dystopians before dark fantasy, and I feel like that's kind of like the equivalent on the sci-fi side of dark fantasy. I think what draws me to it is it's a way to, you play with these like dark elements, but in kind of a safe space. Like I get to be the god of my world, and there's all kinds of things in the real world that I can't control that are very frustrating. But if I'm kind of the ruler of this fantasy world, I get to choose the darkness and also choose what happens with it. And I find that very cathartic. So it's kind of ironic that when I write dark fantasy, I feel kind of happy about it, because I'm like, I can choose who dies, and I can choose who, to the detriment of our readers, I'm sure. But it's fun to be able to control that and to choose who gets to win and how that path happens.
It's always fascinating when we're reading a fantasy novel where it's set in a world that we know, and there's the other elements in the world where it almost feels like, wait, maybe there is gloomist, maybe there is alchemy, and I just haven't found it yet. So can you all talk a bit about your world building, particularly when you're developing those systems of magic and how they fit in with the social and the political elements of those worlds?
So I think one of the reasons that I write dark fantasy is that I'm afraid of a lot of things. In particular, I have spent a lifetime afraid of supernatural things. And my mom absolutely told us that she had encountered several ghosts, one that haunted the house that we lived in, and which who she had played with in the attic as a child. And so I believed in everything growing up. And at some point I have now, I'm not sure I believe, but boy, do I want to. And so I think a lot of my world building comes out of trying to capture that feeling of like true belief, of like the thing that's right out of the corner of your eye, or around the bend, the thing that will finally prove that all of this is real. And the thing that will also unsettle you, because if you believe in everything, then you've spent a lot of time in your life being like, ooh. And so I think a lot of my world building comes out of that. It comes out of trying to take something and imagine what it would really be used for, how people would really interact with it. But also, something that gives me that frisson of like magic and awe and strangeness.
Yeah, I think that's so compelling to think about, because I feel like since the beginning of time, we're just trying to figure out ways to explain the unexplainable. And like back even in our caveman days, you look at the sky, you're like, I don't know what that burning thing is up there. It's definitely a god riding a chariot across the sky. That makes sense. That tracks. And then as time goes on, I feel like we explain more and more, which science is great, but it's also everything is amazing and no one is amazed anymore. And I think it's you gotta kind of dig a little bit to keep the magic alive. And I think urban fantasy is kind of the modern day equivalent of cavemen trying to explain the sun in the sky. You're trying to explain, like, what is that weird shadow in my room, and what is the thing that goes bump in the night. And I live in LA, and I feel like LA is a city that has a little bit of that you just can't quite explain things. Sometimes I'm just in like a random dark street and you see this like rusted old doorway with like a number on it. And I'm just like, that is a portal. I can't prove it, but that is a portal. And that's where the what ifs start happening. You know, I love conspiracy theories. You're just like, what if aliens did do this or that? What if, you know, that led somewhere else? And then you just start asking yourself, what if, what if, what if? And I think that's something so appealing about urban fantasy in particular, because it is explaining our world, but adding that magic back in, adding in the, you know, the unknowable back in. Yeah.
And I think we often think of world building as being about like coming up with rules and, you know, like sort of specific logic pieces. But I think there really is a lot to say about aesthetic world building. Like there is like that sense of, you know, how do you make it feel? Like that moment when you thought that's a portal. Like, and it is often about aesthetic details. And I think about a lot that kind of world building, as well as like, okay, now how do I make the rules match?
It's so interesting to hear you say that, because it does just lock on in the sort of first 2 chapters in both of your books where we meet the characters in those environments. It does feel very visceral, like you can feel that environment. So I love sort of hearing that connection. So obviously you both are very prolific in the YA space. What inspired this exploration of the adult fiction genre for both of you?
For me, I've been thinking about the general ideas for Red City since like 2019, like in the before times, before COVID. And I always knew it was going to be adult. I didn't really know all the specifics of the story, but I think, and I'm still kind of learning the line between YA and adult, and I think more and more there is a gradient there, but I'm starting to understand that the reason why I wanted to tell this as adult is that Red City, you know, it's kind of like The Godfather with alchemy magic, and in order for me to tell the story that I wanted to tell, which is a story about ambition and the cost of it, what you're willing to do for what you want in life, are you willing to sacrifice the people you love and, you know, the things that are important to you, I needed scale. I needed a scale of timeline to see the consequences of a decision rippling out through many, many years, from childhood through adulthood, and also how it affects a wider circle outside of that character. I think what I love about YA is that it's so immediate. Like everything is like happening right now. Like this is happening to me right now. You know, I'm entering the Hunger Games immediately. Everything's terrible to me. Like it's very, very like focused and intense and immediate. And I think as far as writing this series, it's felt like I can kind of take a step back and use a wide-angle lens and show, you know, this thing that's happening, this person is affecting this thing on the other side of the world, or there's another person that this is hitting, you know, in another city. And hey, what about this adult character? Like I have adult points of view that get to explore, you know, a mother's point of view, and you know, older characters that I never got to do, and I don't think I had the perspective to write that when I was younger, but it's been really fun and challenging to explore that.
So, you know, as you know from my story, I thought I was writing an adult book with my first book. And, you know, I kind of came into YA, I was thinking a lot about the difference between like our first publication stories, and that really is the story of how YA changed. Like how kids publishing changed. When I came in, it was pretty sleepy. You know, you didn't need an agent to submit. And then it just blew up. And so I was there through all of that and sort of, you know, writing YA, and it was a really exciting time to be writing YA, but I also kept thinking, I want to write an adult book. But then adult became this kind of promised land where every time something was going wrong in my career, I was like, I will run away to adult, where everything is perfect all the time. And then actually writing an adult book seemed like I would have to give up my dream, because I knew, like, once I entered adult publishing, it would be publishing, you know, with highs and lows. But it was hard to give up my dream of it just being a place I could run away to. Everything would be perfect. But you know, with Book of Night, It's a story. I love to write stories about people who make big mistakes. And in this case, it's someone who already made those big mistakes, and who is suffering through the consequences, and who is sort of like hiding from themselves, I think, in a big way. And because of that, I think it was appropriate to be an adult book in a way that it couldn't be, for a younger reader. And it was really fun to write about things in my life that felt adult that I couldn't write about before.
Thank you. Marie, I read that the first scene of Red City was actually inspired by a childhood experience of yourself. So I'd love to open this up to both of you. What of your characters have you sort of put yourself into those stories, and what have you actually drawn from your own characters in your life now?
Yeah, the opening. So Red City is about this young woman named Sam who gets roped into like an alchemy mafia. So this world is one that's ruled by alchemy syndicates, and she and her childhood friend Ari end up on opposite sides of this alchemy war. And I am not personally experienced in alchemy, but when I was a kid, I was an immigrant kid from China, and my mom's first job in America was that she was a waitress, and I would spend a lot of summers in like the restaurant's broom closet. It was like a little Chinese restaurant in New Orleans, and I would just live in this like broom closet of the restaurant where they had like a little black and white TV and a couch, and I would just sit in there and wait for my mom to get off work. And that's how the book opens, is Sam kind of in this setting. And I think that Sam and I are very different people, but I think that the story draws a lot on the experience of trying to claw your way out of a situation or finding a better life for yourself. And that's what I was watching my parents do, and something I think a lot of people can kind of relate to. And what do you give up when you are in that process, and how does the world exploit that feeling, and what does it do to the relationships that you have with people? So that's where Sam came from. I really don't want to live in the version of our world that's in Red City. It's a little brutal. I don't think I would make it. But it was fun kind of drawing on some experiences. And then Ari was actually inspired by this little boy that I remember from childhood. Like I moved around a lot in elementary school, and I remember in 4th grade I was in this new school for only 6 months, didn't know anybody. I sat in the back of the room and was very shy and quiet. But there was this boy who sat next to me who was really sweet. Like we weren't friends, but he was friendly. And if I forgot my pencil, like he would just kind of quietly slide a pencil over. If I forgot some notes, he would just slide his notebook over. He was just like a sweet kid. And then I left. I don't even remember his name, but he was the inspiration for Ari. Yeah.
Book of Night and Thief of Night are about Charlie Hall, who is a thief of these books that people are using to learn how to. There's sort of an old magic that people were not aware of. This is a book that isn't entirely established magic, and it isn't entirely hidden magic. It's magic that is emerging, where people realize that if their shadows are quickened, they can control them. And for a long time, because the magic would manifest in different ways, people would basically burn up their shadows before they learned how to control them, but they're seeking these magical tomes that will teach them how, and Charlie's been a thief of them. And so she's been going around to libraries, she's been going around to people's collections, and that's what she was doing until things went real bad, and then she went off and became a bartender, where she's trying to keep her head down, and that's where we are at the start of the book. And I think there's 2 things from my life that I took. For one, this is the first book that I ever wrote that's set in where I live now. I've been writing about New Jersey, where I grew up, and New York, and this is set in Western Massachusetts, and it was super, super fun to include all of the extremely weird things about Western Mass. And so, when I read the beginning at home, it's a very different experience because people start just laughing about random things that I've put in here. And obviously, not things that would be funny to anyone else. And I think the second thing that I really took from my own life is I believe that there is a really, I believe there is a similarity between the way con artists see the world and the way people with social anxiety see the world. And I have massive social anxiety. And when you have massive social anxiety, you're a real close face watcher. And you're always kind of like, your conversations are not natural. You're always in your head thinking about what the other person is thinking and how like to make them like you. And all of this stuff that actually, to me, like really resembles being a con artist and makes it really easy to sink into that, that self. And so I really feel like I drew on my social anxiety for all of the con artistry in the book.
I want to speak cautiously here because I don't want to reveal any spoilers, but at Book of Night, there are certainly some twists in the book. So when you are writing a twist, whether it be a reveal or a twist ending, how do you find that balance of, I don't want this to completely come out of nowhere, I want to lay this groundwork, but I don't necessarily need it to be obvious, or maybe you want it to be obvious?
How to write twists. I'm a chaos gremlin. I don't know.
I didn't hear what this means.
I mean, it's basically like I try to outline, but by chapter 3, I'm like off in the weeds, and this is like been a recurring theme. I'm come to accept and made peace with the idea that I just don't follow directions well. So I don't know my plot twists until they happen. So my first drafts are just chaos. Like halfway through, suddenly something will happen because I'm just suddenly like, ooh, what if this character just dies right now? Let's try that. 5 chapters later, I'm like, no, that doesn't work. And I go back and I'm like, what if this random thing happens? And that's kind of how I just kind of bulldoze my way through a first draft. And so just halfway through, characters will go missing for no reason. And then, people's names change or whatever. And then by the second draft is when I go back and try to make sense of it. I'm like, okay, how do I piece together this into something that makes sense? I've decided to do this random thing to this character that's not connected to anything else, so let's connect it to something, and then kind of work backwards that way towards a plot twist. How do you handle yours?
It depends, because, in this case, I knew the twist because the twist was the entire premise of the book. So, that was the idea. But there was a lot I didn't know, and so I too often am, in this place where I'm like, will I figure out this book? Will I figure it out in time? Because I'm often going forward and then going back and then ripping out sections. I do not find it to be a fun process. I love editing, do not like drafting.
Exact same way.
But I think, one thing I always try to remember in twists is a twist has to make things more interesting, not less interesting. It's really easy to come up with a twist that actually is not very satisfying. And so I think that is probably the first thing. And I think the second thing is, if you're going to try to hide a twist, the best way to hide a twist is behind another twist. Because often you can have a twist that is not that twisty, right? It's a situation where the reader has probably guessed, and they're probably feeling pretty good about themselves, And if you can do that thing, and then immediately the next thing that they did not guess, it's a nice place to put it, if you can.
This explains so much about my reading experience for your book.
I used to think I was so unique, and now I'm like, oh, I'm such a target for Holly. So Silver Dawn, the sequel to Red City, that comes out April of next year. And so, woo, yes, to the woos. Same system of magic, but now we are in an entirely different world. We're going to Belle-Epoque. Can you talk a bit about what we can expect in the sequel?
Yeah, I'm excited. I think it's the first time I'm talking about the sequel. So Silver Dawn is set in London, Londinium in this version of the world, and we get to explore some of the European syndicates and the shenanigans they're up to. So I had a lot of fun kind of moving it over to overseas, and Sam and Ari are back, and they are angstier than ever. There's some, what can I say without spoiling things? There are some old enemies that will return, and old friends, and I I'm like, what else can I say? There's going to be a World's Fair. I think that's something that I had a lot of fun building out because I thought the old World's Fairs were so cool and they seemed so romantic, you know? And then this goes back to the whole, like, everything's amazing and no one's amazed. Like, we kind of stopped doing the World's Fair, but what if they came back and what if they were, like, alchemy fused? So there's a little bit of all of that in it, and I had a lot of fun playing with it, so I hope people enjoy it.
I'm sure we will. And you also have another book coming out a bit sooner in November, Conspiracy of Charming Monsters, where you are returning to another world. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Well, it's a short story collection, so it's some of which you may have already seen, and some of which are new, and it's going to be beautifully illustrated by Celine, and I am really looking forward to it because I like a really pretty book, and it's been exciting for me to see all the illustrations. And then I'm working on, a different thing that apparently I can still no longer tell you about, but will be out the year after, so next year.
All right. Well, we have something to look forward about asking you about next year. No problem. I'm excited. I had read that when you were talking about Legend, I'm going to go back to your YA. You were inspired by Les Mis when you wrote that. So I'm curious, are there any other musicals that if you were to let that inspire a magic world, what do you think you'd want to explore?
Ooh, I've never been asked that before. Well, the last musical I saw was Hadestown, which I absolutely loved.
I was thinking that would be a particularly good inspiration, right?
So, well, actually, appropriately enough, my upcoming YA Immortal Things is about the god of death, so I guess that is kind of connected, although not directly inspired by Hadestown, but now I kind of wish it was. Yeah.
Do you want to answer it too?
Oh my God.
You seem so intrigued by it.
I was intrigued, but I am not sure that I got nothing. I mean, probably Hadestown because I really love, mythology and, grew up reading, all the Delirious books and then have read it to my son. And so, I definitely think there's some part of that is sticky, but I have never figured out quite how to make it stick.
Similarly, though, you often get asked, when is insert name of book going to become a movie or a television show? So of all of what you've written, what is the thing that you would love to see on screen? And we don't need to think about who would be in it or anything, but what is the thing that you would love to see translated into that format?
I would love to see The Cruel Prince as an animated series. I would love to see it animated.
Yes.
Like that would be so fun. Long ago, the Jim Henson optioned my first book, and I've always thought Muppet Tithe was really, really a missed opportunity.
I would love to see Red City made. I think it would be so fun. It's set in the real world. Other than Red City, I would love to see Warcross made. I think Warcross is like a near future sci-fi about a video game that would probably cost like $1 billion to make. So I'm not sure it would ever happen, but it would be really fun.
I love that. So we referenced it earlier, sort of how the YA industry was when you had started, and things have evolved. In general, things have evolved greatly with book talk and social media. So in your experiences, how have you sort of experienced the industry changing, and where would you like to see things evolve for you both?
Give me a second.
I mean, it's a great question. I think we're at a very interesting time. Certainly the industry has changed hugely over the years. It has, become more open. I think it has a long way to go. But I think that that is a really important thing, to become more diverse, to become, to have more voices being heard. And I think that certainly now, I mean, when I started, when people would talk about self-publishing, it wasn't possible because there was just no distribution. And now that's a whole different arm where people are having a very different publishing experience and coming into a very different publishing ecosystem. And I feel like there's so much there that is evolving in a way that I kind of am outside of. I don't know I feel like I spend a lot of time with my friends being like, what's going to happen next? But I'm not sure that I truly have any idea. I think things are moving so fast now.
No, I totally agree. And I'm always interested in hearing your perspective on it, because you've seen the industry over this long span, and even I think this is year 14 for me. So I have also seen this. I feel like I came into YA at a very unusual time. I didn't know it was unusual at the time. It was right when the Hunger Games came out. YA was like exploding on the scene in this very strange way, and I came in. I was like, this is normal. Like, this is fine. But at the time, you were saying about diversity. At the time, it seemed like it was insanity to write yourself into the story if you were POC or a minority or marginalized in any way. Like, if you looked at the bestsellers list back then, it was 100% straight white. Like, there was no deviation from that. And I remember when I wrote Legend, I remember crying about it, where I was like, there's two paths you can take. You can either write yourself out of the story and tell something inauthentic and make it as a career, or you can be authentic and be shelved on the side, And those were the two options you kind of had to choose. And everyone I knew who was marginalized in any way had to choose one of those two paths. And so I think when I look back on my younger self as a writer, I can very much see myself hiding. I can read back over my writing and tell that I'm pulling back. And I think that has obviously changed enormously in many ways. I agree that there's a long way to go for that, but it's really nice to see the industry maturing in some ways. I hope that it keeps going in that direction. I love that Book Talk has kind of made books kind of cool and hip again, and made it possible to hype things up in a way that I don't remember existing. And I agree, things are moving so fast. I remember when I first came out, that was when ebooks had just come on the scene, and everyone's like, oh my God, books on your phone? This is gonna destroy everything. And so I think we go through a crisis every decade or so, but books are still around. We'll figure it out as we go. So big question mark on what's coming up, but hopefully good things.
I think that you made such a good point that I think sometimes when we do see that the landscape is more diverse, we forget how brave it was for the people who were sticking their neck out there and writing the stories that they didn't know what would happen to. It was a tough time. Actually doing that was really brave.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote on the backs of Cindy Pon and Melinda Lowe and Ellen O. Those were the three. I knew 3 Asian authors. Oh, and Jenny Han, of course. Was the trailblazers in that realm, and because they were there, I could even consider the possibility of publishing. So yeah, just kind of all building on the backs of one another.
So we're going to transition to audience questions in just a moment. So our audience actually on the BookCon app submitted questions, and I've got a few here. So Leandra, is there one character you've created that you think you relate to the most? Who would it be? Or one that impacts you the most?
I think there's 2 for me. Sam in Red City obviously has bits and pieces of myself. My wish fulfillment version of myself is Amika from Warcross. She is who I wish I was more like, but she has a lot of me in her. She's like a gamer. She's a skateboarder. I'm not a skateboarder, but I wish I was. She is a snowboarder. I'm not a snowboarder, but I wish I was. And is just a very kind of punk, sassy, rainbow-colored hair girl who, I was like, everything that she can do is stuff that I wish I could do.
I don't think any of them are really like me in a lot of ways because I am a coward. but I certainly there's different pieces of me and different people. Ren from the Stolen Air series. I'm shy. She was probably the first character I wrote that was really shy. And I think my sense of humor and often the internal way I think and talk is probably the most Castle Sharp from the Curse Workers. I think that interiority. I was yeah, okay. And so I think there's just but I feel like I am so spread out into all these different people.
This one comes from Lydia. Lydia said, why do you think dark fantasy in particular has resonated with readers so much when things write can feel so dark?
I think it's cathartic to read it too. It's a safe space. For me, I like reading darkness just because I'm this is fiction and I trust the author is going to get us out of this one way or the other in a way that, you can't, I don't have that faith in the real world, especially these days. So, I kind of turn to fiction for that.
I think it gives us a way to conquer it, right? To feel like we can conquer it and control it. If you think about the evolution of the vampire, right? The vampire starts out as being a hideous monster that comes back from the dead. Then it becomes kind of a less hideous monster, but still quite monstrous, right? And then it becomes, kind of an ambivalent monster. So, a little anti-hero. And then it just becomes the hero who you can conquer through, the figure loving you, right? You can conquer death through love. And I think that is that feeling of being able to conquer darkness with the power of, you being you and you, wanting to and you exerting your will upon the world is an incredibly both reassuring and also self-actualizing, right, way to see the world. And I think dark fantasy affords us that.
This comes from Caitlin. Caitlin said, what are things in your career that you're most proud of?
Oh, wow.
I just had 12 embarrassing moments pop up, and that's not the question.
Can we get one embarrassing?
I think every time I meet a reluctant reader who read my books, I feel really proud. I think, I think there's a slight difference between wanting to be a writer and wanting to be a published writer, and I think the reason why is because we're trying to connect with someone else. So I care very, very much about what readers think, and am trying to write something that is a dialogue. So when I meet a young reader who is I've been trying to find a book that I would like and I haven't found it, but then I read yours, that is truly the most rewarding thing that could ever happen. So yeah.
Yeah, I think certainly one of the things I'm most proud of is just finishing my first book. It took a really long time, and I remember the end, writing the end and thinking, oh my God, I wrote a book. And then, yeah, absolutely. When you meet readers who are telling you, this book really helped me, because I wrote the Spiderwick books, I have kids coming up to me saying this is the first book I read on my own. And sometimes now they're adults who now have read other of my books and have stuck with me for a really long time. And we have this, a long time relationship. And it is incredibly meaningful. It's always a situation where I feel like somebody is giving me something and I do not know what I can give back in that moment because it feels like such a big gift.
This comes from Kelly. Kelly says, what is the most challenging thing about creating these new worlds or alternate worlds? And what is your favorite part?
I think the most challenging thing is, I was talking about the aesthetics, and often I start a book with a feeling and a character and maybe some part of an idea. And I am what is the story that will give me the feeling I have when I think about this idea, or occasionally when I think about a picture in my mind? What story would give me that? And that sucks. And man, when you go to your friends and you're so help me out here, they're I need way more than this to help you. And so I think that is probably the thing that is the biggest challenge. And then I think the thing I like the most is the editing. I like when I have that draft, and at that point, look, I'm not going to make it worse, which is a great feeling. And then I can go in and I can refine the language and I can really try to get at the specificity of these moments and like the heart of these characters. And I can really do the work that I think I most enjoy once I finally do get a story that will take me to the places to allow me to do that.
Yeah, I think I have a very similar answer because we both hate writing first drafts, and I think the first draft is absolutely my least favorite thing to do. Oh, I'm in the middle of it right now, and I just hate every second of it because of that reason that you said. You know, revisions is where you get the feeling. You're like working on the feeling. And first draft is logistics. It's all logistics. There's a left brain like, how do I get the character from A to B? They need to meet C, and they need to do this, 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 and this. And it's just very painful, you know, to kind of build the scaffolding and the foundation of everything. So I hate that. And if we can get to the revision part, it's great. And if you don't know, like you're actually one of the best at helping people through that early part, because we've had many conversations where I'm just like, Holly, I don't know what to do with this story. Can you help me?
I have
Holly
made
is
every mistake,
best,
so I can talk about every mistake.
best story breaker for you. Like, Holly can ask any question, and suddenly I'm like, oh my God, you're right. That's why I had writer's block. And so sometimes it helps to talk it out with other writers and, talk it out with someone else.
I love that. Do you have any sort of like personal celebration that you do once you get past the editing point, or once you've turned it in to someone else to look over things?
I used to. That's gone now.
Mine is always food related. I'm always like, it's just like a carrot dangling, where, I'm like, if I can just get this first draft done, I am gonna eat all of my favorite foods in one day. That has also changed over time. As I've gotten older, you kind of have to space that out a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, my tummy hurts a lot more now. This comes from Anaya. She said, Anaya said, when you begin writing a dark fantasy novel, do you lead with the characters or do you start with the setting? What constitute as dark? And when does the story shift from being atmospheric to haunting?
What? Go for it.
I'm processing.
Processing that.
Yeah. I do always start with a character. The world almost never comes to me first, but I have, like what you were saying, a feeling and a character. And with Legend, Day obviously was a character recycled from another manuscript, but he was the first thing that existed for that world. And then from there, I usually ask questions related to the character. I knew that Day was a criminal, and so I started asking myself, why would he be a criminal? And if the world is to support a criminal who is a hero, what kind of world would support that? And then what is the supporting cast for a character like that? And then pieces will start to come in. I think I've always kind of naturally bent towards darkness, so sometimes I have trouble explaining why I want to put it in. Like, I wrote a lot of fan fiction when I was a kid, and any fan fiction involving a video game character usually involved them dying immediately. And I went back and read it, I'm like, what is wrong with me? Yeah, I still don't really know, but what constitutes darkness? And then, at what point does it
shift from being atmospheric to haunting? It actually reminds me of the graph that you were, the line that you were talking about earlier.
In dark fantasy, yeah.
I think those two words feel very, like I am trying to figure out what those two words could represent. That is how I think, because I think part of it is that, I would think of haunting as being one aspect of atmospheric. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where I'm getting tripped up, like, because, how a book starts could be haunting, right? And then it could go from there to being atmospheric. Like, it's not I think where a book starts, it isn't always a progression of like good, slightly worse. Slightly worse after that, right? And it often is a little bit like that. And but I will say that the thing about the beginning is, I think for me, I go over and over and over the beginning, and I need the beginning to be at a certain point before I can write chapter 2 and before I can write the whole book. And part of that is because I need to know, what is the texture of this book? What is the atmosphere of this book? And also because I think in a first chapter, you're making promises to the reader. And so you are promising a certain kind of book based on what happens in that beginning, and not just based on what happens, but how you wrote it.
No, I think that's actually that kind of helped me understand, the question a bit too, because I think, atmospheric is kind of what you start the character off with, and haunting is what you leave them with, right? After you put it down, I am haunted, for years sometimes, and I think haunted is also character based. Characters haunt me by what they do. The atmosphere is kind of the world, what you feel like when you're in that world. And so I think you start off with you build the atmosphere of the world, which I felt so strongly in Book of Night. Immediately I'm like, I know what I'm getting into. And then you meet the characters and you see what's wrong with them. And then you're like, that's gonna haunt me.
That's so interesting. It's such an interesting goal too for an ending, to make it haunting.
Yeah.
So we talked a bit about your transition from YA to adult fantasy and what inspired it. But Bella wants to know, what was the transition like for you in writing those books?
It was pretty brutal for me. I had a hard time. I remember I wrote the first draft of Red City not quite understanding the difference between YA and adult, except just to make the characters adult, technically. And I would give it to my agent, and she would punt it back, and she's like, this is YA. And then I kept writing it, and she would be like, this is YA, this is YA. And I was like, I don't understand. The characters are adults, they have jobs. What else is there? And she was kind of the one who was like, it's a feeling, Sometimes you can read it, the Goldfinch, by Dawn and Hart. It's about a kid for the most part, but then very obviously it's adult. She was like, it's a feeling of perspective, of being able to look back on things, to be able to think about, I remember you mentioning there's rent involved, there's there's everyday things that the characters think about that aren't really in the immediate world of YA. So I had a really hard time with that. I struggled with figuring out that voice and the pace and making it feel adult in a way that I'm still kind of figuring out. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely overcomplicated it in my mind. There was it was way more straightforward to do than it was for me to, try to go over and over and over, ideate on. But I think the thing that was toughest, which is going to sound so ridiculous once I say it, when you're an adult, you had a lot more years of life. And because you had a lot more years of life, you have a lot more experiences and a lot more friendships. And there's a lot more backstory. And so if you're used to telling, a certain amount of backstory, well, double it, because adults have been many different people by the time they're adults. Even if they're, in their late 20s and therefore, not in their 50s and you don't have all of that, you still have a lot. You still have, all of the different versions of them and all of the sort of shed people that were in their lives. And that was really tough when I wasn't used to doing it.
So we're coming up on the end of our time, and I wanted to ask, Holly, you spoke in an interview that magic has to be thematically related to the character. So for Marie, for Holly, what would your system of magic be?
Anxiety-based.
Yeah, I think I would also be anxiety. I think a lot of authors would be anxiety-based. We're just nervous little vibrating balls.
I actually think there could be a real market for this. I don't think we're alone.
You are not. Well, I want to thank Holly and Marie. I want to thank you both so much for your time today. Thank you, all of you. And wherever you are who submitted our questions, thank you. Have a great rest of your con. I'm Julie, Holly, and Marie, everyone.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you.
Ooh, that's right, BookCon. Give it up one more time. thank you all for joining us in here. I hope the rest of your weekend brings you back to us. But for now, please get out.